In this video, we're going to be talking about a sports supplement that's been studied for literally decades, has been shown to improve performance consistently, but nonetheless, many athletes have avoided using because of side effects. And that supplement is sodium bicarbonate. And a recent product has come out onto the market that advertises itself as eliminating those major side effects and has led to many athletes starting to use this particular product, including lots of elite athletes. So we're going to be talking about the science behind sodium bicarbonate, this product specifically, and what science exists on it. And then I'll give you my perspective from my own personal experience of using this product before one of my own races. Now, the first thing that we're going to talk about here is what is sodium bicarb? How does it work to improve exercise performance? And then what types of exercises is it going to work best for? Basically, sodium bicarbonate is baking soda. It's a staple in a kitchen pantry, can be used for cleaning, can be used for cooking, but for decades has actually been studied as a potential performance enhancer. Now, this works in large part by acting as an acid buffer. So bicarbonate is a buffer in your bloodstream that helps to deal with acidosis. So think during high intensity, especially anaerobic type exercise where your body's producing a lot of metabolites that create an acidic environment in your muscle, that helps to buffer some of that acidosis. Now, bicarbonate is not a miracle supplement. It's not going to improve your performance by 10 or 20 or 30%. In most cases, it might be 1 to 2 to maybe 3%, as shown by this meta-analysis that was done several years ago. They looked at performance. They saw on average about a 1.7% improvement in events that tend to be high intensity type exercise in nature. Now, how meaningful is a 1.7% improvement in performance? If you think of something like an 800-meter run in track, which is definitely going to be an event that sodium bicarb would theoretically help for, we're looking at a couple of seconds for an athlete that runs 2 minutes in that event. So that's certainly not meaningless and certainly could change the outcome of the race, especially in high-level athletics where oftentimes the margin of victory is incredibly small. So it's a worthwhile improvement in performance for high-intensity exercise, especially exercise that's very anaerobic in nature, but it isn't going to change performance by 5, 10% in most realistic type competition scenarios. Now, sodium bicarbonate has been studied as a performance enhancer since at least the 1970s, but yet if you look at surveys of athletes and what supplements they use, sodium bicarb is barely ever mentioned as a common supplement across a wide range of sports, at least traditionally. Why is that? And the main reason is that with the dosing strategies that are typically used, it's very common for athletes to have such bad gut problems that they cannot perform optimally. Now, why does sodium bicarb cause gut problems? What is it actually doing? So if you think about what it is, right, it's an acid buffer. And when that bicarbonate gets into your stomach, it's going to interact with hydrochloric acid or stomach acid. You think back to elementary school or middle school, if you ever did an experiment where you made a volcano or something like that, you might have mixed an acid with baking soda to kind of produce that eruption, right? Basically, what we're getting is a lot of CO2 or carbon dioxide production when the acid interacts with the bicarb. And that's happening in your stomach. So think a lot of rapid gas production. We're going to get bloating. We're going to get fullness, burping, nausea, vomiting in some cases. Not most people, but it does happen. So that's kind of the first set of symptoms an athlete might expect to experience if they're loading with sodium bicarb. Now, maybe 30 minutes after the initial symptoms, you start to get symptoms that affect the lower half of the gut. As that sodium bicarb makes its way into the intestines, you might start to feel kind of crampy. You're going to have urges to use the restroom, loose stools, right? And that's because that sodium and some of the bicarb is sort of acting as an osmotic agent, or it's causing water to be pulled out into the intestines, which is going to lead to that crampy sensation and urges to have to go to the bathroom. So both upper and lower problems tend to be prevalent with baking soda use in a sports setting. And obviously, if it's severe enough, that's not going to be conducive to performance. And that's a big reason why, despite having lots of evidence for improving performance, it has been rarely used by athletes in the real world. They don't want to risk the gut problems before a big competition. So just how bad can the symptoms be from sodium bicarb loading? We're going to take a look at an example study here that compared a traditional loading protocol to a placebo and then had participants rate for a few hours afterwards their gastrointestinal side effects. Now, the dosage used in this study is very similar to what a lot of studies have used, which is 0.3 grams of sodium bicarb for every kilogram of body mass. So you take 0.3, multiply times your body mass, and you get the total amount of bicarb that you need to take. Typically, that ranges from maybe a little under 20 grams to 25 grams. Maybe for really big athletes, close to 30 grams is kind of the amount that is being consumed. And in this case, they put the placebo, which is corn flour, and the bicarb into gelatin capsules. And you can take a look at the peak, or the highest symptom they experienced after ingestion in this table here. And you see 5 of 14 participants in the sodium bicarb group rated sort of their diarrhea 10 out of 10. So I'd put that into easy terms. They're at maximal rating for, let's call it the Harry Dunn scale from Dumb and Dumber, right? Basically glued to the toilet, not able to do anything else. You're not going to be able to perform well under those conditions. Now, there are other symptoms, obviously, that you can see here that were experienced with sodium bicarb, with basically minimal to nothing in the placebo group. So relatively recently, the Swedish company Maurten, who makes sports nutrition products, has basically claimed that they've made a product that largely eliminates these gut problems. And they've got elite athletes using their product. Examples being Keely Hodgkinson, Faith Kipyegon, and probably most hilariously, Michael Woods during the most recent road championships in Zurich, literally eating the product out of a Tupperware container in the middle of the race. Now, how does this product supposedly work to reduce gastrointestinal problems? Well, there's really 2 innovations that the company claims reduce those problems. The first being its hydrogel technology. Essentially, when this product gets into your stomach, it forms a hydrogel which sort of surrounds and protects the bicarbonate from stomach acid. So reducing the amount of interaction between acid and the bicarb, which would eliminate or largely reduce the gas production that happens in the stomach with typical bicarb loading protocols. The second innovation that they talk about is that they use these mini tablets as a way to help facilitate emptying from the stomach. Whereas with the capsule, which is going to be a bit larger, it might get kept in the stomach a bit longer. And that, again, is going to lead to maybe symptoms like bloating, burping, and other types of problems that arise from that gas production. Now, what does the science say as to whether or not this product actually reduces gut problems? Well, really, there's one study that's been done that really focused on the gastrointestinal side effects from typical bicarb loading as compared to this product. And what they did is they had cyclists come in, ingest the product, ingest a typical bicarb protocol using vegetarian capsules, and then compared gastrointestinal problems for the next few hours. And you can kind of see from the graph here that clearly gastrointestinal problems were lower with the bicarb product, at least compared to a traditional protocol where you ingest bicarb in a relatively short amount of time using regular sort of capsules. So yes, based on that study, at least, it seems like this product does a pretty good job at least minimizing gastrointestinal problems compared to a typical classic loading protocol. Now, that study did not actually look at performance directly. There have been a couple of studies published since that looked more directly at performance. One looking at 4-kilometer cycling, sort of high intensity, short, highly anaerobic cycling. And then another looked at 40-kilometer cycling, which took around about 1 hour for the participants that were involved in that study. And in both cases, there were significant improvements in performance in the Maurten Bicarb condition relative to placebo. So the few studies that have been done on this product are generally supportive so far in terms of reducing the gastrointestinal problems while also eliciting the typical benefits to performance that you get with sodium bicarb use. So from that perspective, the product does seem to be effective. Now, I wanted to use this product myself before a race, and I chose to use it before a 10-kilometer running race that I had. Although that's highly aerobic, there is some evidence, albeit not as much, that shows sodium bicarb might also be useful for sort of those intermediate type aerobic events, like a 5K or a 10K. In fact, one of the bicarb studies from the Maurten product that was recently done, again, looked at roughly 1 hour of cycling, 40-kilometer cycling, and found over a 50-second improvement in performance in that particular study. So plausible that it could help a 10K performance. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a highlight here from a couple of other videos I recorded on my perceptual experiences with eating the product, and then how I felt after the race, having used the product beforehand. All right. So it's 6:15, about an hour and 45 minutes before my 10K, about the time I'm supposed to eat this bicarb product. And here it is. Eat it in a little bowl. You mix in the powder with water, and then you dump in the little tablets. And you get this gooey, gelatinous, semi-liquid mixture. You're not supposed to chew the tablets, so you just kind of eat it and swallow. It's an interesting flavor, slightly sweet, gelatinous. It's sort of like if you made Jell-O, but it didn't solidify. Jell-O soup. All right, just finished the 10K, time of 37:21. Didn't really have any gastrointestinal problems beforehand or during, so at least in that respect, the product seemed to work as advertised. Hard to say how much of the time was due to the product versus the sort of ideal weather conditions that we had. It was in the high 50s, not too much humidity, minimal wind, so could have just been that, but the product certainly didn't hurt. So the 30-second PR that I experienced in my 10K, it's hard to say whether or not the Maurten product had a little to do with that, a lot to do with that, or whether or not it was just due to changes in weather or training or other factors. Nonetheless, the product did seem to minimize any gastrointestinal problems that I experienced and didn't hurt my performance. So generally speaking, I think this product is potentially worth a try for athletes who are looking to enhance performance in high intensity exercise type tasks or events, including anaerobic, but even some aerobic type activities. Now, what's the major downside of using this product? Taste isn't particularly great in my point of view. It's tolerable, but I wouldn't necessarily, it's a pleasant experience eating this. But the big thing, I think, in terms of the average user is going to be the cost. One serving of this is around $15 to $20 for one serving. That is probably the most or one of the most expensive sports supplements on the market in terms of a per serving basis. Now, if you were to just take baking soda, just plain old baking soda, and ingest it in a beverage, it's probably going to cost you 9 or 10 cents per serving. So this product costs roughly 190 times the typical cost of baking soda. Now, is that up pricing worth the benefits? Depends on who you are. Depends on how many gastrointestinal problems you have from the typical loading protocol. Now, I decided to give another methodology a try to reduce gastrointestinal problems from baking soda, with the idea that I don't want to spend probably $17 on this every time I want to use baking soda. And I used enteric coated capsules. So that study I showed earlier on that reported really bad gastrointestinal problems with bicarb, well, they also used enteric coated capsules as a way to try and reduce those problems. So why enteric coated capsules? Well, they're coated with a resin that protects the contents of those capsules from stomach acid. So when you ingest bicarb in enteric coated capsules, it's going to reduce the amount of interaction between bicarb and hydrochloric acid, thereby reducing gas production, symptoms like bloating, burping, nausea, fullness. So the idea here is you're trying to really delay the release of the bicarb from the capsules until it gets into the intestines, which is a less acidic environment where you're not going to get as much of that gas production. And you can kind of see here from the same table that I showed earlier on, that includes the enteric coated capsule condition. It does, in studies at least, seemingly reduce those problems. So what I decided to do was buy some enteric coated capsules, fill them with baking soda, and then try them before a recent interval run that I did for training. So it ended up being over 30 capsules that I had to consume. I consumed a third of the dose, total dose, every 20 minutes. So over the course of an hour. And I started roughly 2.5 hours before my run. Now, the first 45 minutes or so went really well. I didn't have any gastrointestinal problems. I didn't have any belching. I didn't have any bloating. But around about an hour after the first dose, I started to feel some rumbling in my stomach. And from my own experience, I know that that is not a fantastic sign for what's about to come. 15 to 20 minutes after that, I had to use the restroom for the first time. Nothing crazy, but certainly came out a bit easier than what it normally would. Another 15, 20 minutes after that, and I was 10 out of 10 on the Harry Dunn scale. It was definitely not a normally formed stool. So despite studies showing that enteric coated capsules can help reduce problems, in my particular experience, using it the one time, I still had some significant side effects. Now, I ended up doing my interval run about 20, 30 minutes after the last time I used the bathroom, and I was fine during the run, no problems. But I would be a little bit hesitant to use that strategy before a race, knowing there's a chance that I could really have some significant problems. So is this product worth the cost? To periodically use it once in a while, I'm more than willing to pay $15 to $20 per serving, but I'm definitely not going to be using it before every single hard workout or race that I do.